Monday and Wednesday and Friday, you're at work Tuesday and Thursday. So there's got to be a balance of coming to and from work also. Even if it means you're coming in, so that the next morning someone can take your laptop home. And that can happen. Technically, that you can do that. So you can share one laptop amongst two people going back and forth during a week. That's easily done. But I do like the accountability and
clarity so we can move on. We're approving this policy in the interim. We can set up a timeline for review in 3 months, 4 months. At any point in time between now and the next 6 months, the county administrator can bring back thoughts, concerns about making an adjustment, a change. So that gives flexibility if it's not working or if it's time to move back away from it or whatever it might be. You know, I'm just saying 6 months. We can change that in a second. We are saying to the directors, the department directors, they can create a plan that does not exceed 50% of people who can work remotely. The key is they have to be able to work remotely. They have to rotate in certain percentage of days. Is it 3 out of the 5 days they need to be on campus? And then they have to be able to produce work remotely. They have to rotate in. I don't think I've left anything out. I don't think that becomes vague. I think that gives you a clear path forward. Are you leaving anything out to help you out with that conversation?
I would ask Mr. Coelho, but while he's getting to the podium, I would say that it applies to non-essential employees only. Right. Alan, do you want to address anything on that subject? You may not want to. Just say, I don't want to.
Yeah, probably. And of course, the accountability factor. I think you didn't mention that the last time you went through the list. So they have to be accountable. They have to actually perform work. It has to be work that can be done remotely. And they have to be present at least sometime during the work week.
And any violation immediately removes them from the capability to work from home at any time.
I think that gives Mike some good direction to consider, and certainly for department heads to mull over as they try to determine whether their employee can truly be effective and accountable trying to work remotely.
Presenting in 6 graduated, whatever it is, gives the ability for us to easily return back to this and say it's not working, or this is the adjustment. Maybe, in fact, that doesn't have to happen. Maybe leadership and you guys can handle that at that moment. But I want to make sure that door stays open so that it needs to be, we can give clarity. I think minimum 2 days, not 3, minimum 2 days on site is another thing that I would produce or add in there.
Minimum.
All right. We're good on that? Claire, there is one more I want to get to. Sorry, Glenn.
Let's do, so you want to discuss the 6 months, because I think 6 months is way too long.
3 months. It's just random.
3 months is fine. I'm thinking February 2nd, because we're going to get through all the holidays, and then we'll have the entire month of January, gather any kinks, and then February, first Tuesday in February meeting, Mike can come back and report to us on whether it's successful or not.
I said 6 months because at any point in time between now and 6 months, if this thing's falling on its face a month from now, that's why I didn't give you 6 months, come back and report. I meant inside of 6 months. 3 months works for me. Because Levy Court can always set I wanted to send a clear message to anyone listening that there's a timeline, there's a sunsetting provision that may or may not be acted on. Mm-hmm.
Can I repeat what I believe I heard? So under the limits or the guidance would be up to 50% remote work in any given work area or department section. They have to be able to work remotely if they are working remotely. They have to be able to do productive work. There's an expectation of rotation so that there's a minimum of 2 days in the office per person. And there'll be report back to Levy Court, and I would just suggest we'll just do it monthly or as needed. I mean, or more frequently, as needed.
One last point of clarification. Not to exceed, but not expected. This isn't a mandate that the departments shall do this. It can be 0% if they're comfortable, so I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression there. And this is not reactive, this is a proactive measure. That's all. And it may not need to be written, I just want to clarify it. More to get to, but I don't know if we've got some more conversation on this one. We don't? Well, let's talk about the first one then. I think this is very important. I'd like to hear from three individuals who are somewhat in charge if I'm off base. But what I've heard, what I feel like I've learned, and what I listened to tonight is we need to tighten the screw on how it gets reported, what the exact steps are, who makes the decision, who administers the decision. I think that needs to be clarified. It needs to be cleared to the department heads so that we don't have individual decisions being made based on what they think they should do when they're not in charge of that decision. So let me repeat what I said, and then you guys can make the decision. I'm going to use this scenario. Employee A notifies the director, who notifies Quayla, who in conjunction with Mike and Chief Faulkner. It can be as brief as this is what we're doing, but they shall all be notified. They shall be informed that we've had an episode, okay? I would like to introduce DPH into the situation. That's what's done at schools. It's very effective. In fact, if I'm accurate, and I'll clarify it tomorrow, they actually reach out. DPH actually administers the decision. They give the recommendation on what you do, at least at Polytech they do, because I spoke to the superintendent, the director of operations, as well as the director of personnel. But I will clarify that tomorrow, that they make a recommendation using CDC guidelines as to how to handle the episode, which might be I happen to brush by somebody or I have COVID. That's all. I think DPH is the only one that I introduced that's new. I think Colin Faulkner, Chief Faulkner, said, well, bi-weekly they let them know what's going on. I think, and I could be wrong, that that's a level of intensity we can improve on. I think we can inform them immediately when it happens. That's what I think can be added. I think Commissioner Sweeney's going to add something maybe a little different. That's all good, and maybe Mike or Chief has something different.
Yeah, I can tell you that DPH is so overloaded with calls from agencies, from school districts, from schools. They're not getting back in a timely manner. We're notifying them, and I can tell you this from my perspective. We notify them. We tell them that masks were worn, social distance was handled, people wash their hands. DPH never comes back and tells us anything for weeks after the event is over. So DPH, notifying them is one thing, which is good for their statistics, but as far as how to handle that, they've already set how to handle everything that happens, from immediate person-to-person contact to two people down the road. So, but what I heard was we do notify DPH when there's a positive case in the county. Correct, Mr. Quayla?
If you test positive, the lab notifies DPH.
That's true.
Ultimately, we get a letter with lots of lag from the DPH saying that the employee is cleared to return to work. Sometimes we get it the day they're cleared to come back to work. So, it's clear to me there's a little bit of lag there. But Commissioner Buxton did discuss this with me, and I'm certainly willing to contact DPH to see if they have a county liaison and see if they can assist us in the process, because we love to have assistance. The chief does provide excellent counsel on this matter, but I'm sure he'd welcome any other input that we could get.
Reflection on, it's not even close. It is a recommendation, well, it is what I think, I was told that the district is doing where I work. And I was told about a county liaison. So we can eliminate that from the process and talk about cleaning things up. Mr. Pettit-Demise.
Thank you, Mr. Bucks. No problem with folding that into the process. We, establish a contact. One thing I just want to clarify in case there was any misconception. Yeah, we've been, the management team gets on a conference twice a week right now. And when we first got into this journey back in March, we were more frequent. Summertime, we kind of less frequent because there was nothing, a whole lot to report. We were touching base occasionally on things like PPE supplies and stuff. Since November, we've ramped back up to 2 times a week, but it's not for the purpose of reporting for the first time the cases. It's really, we're touching base as a group with each, we basically usually have some news. I usually let the chief lead off with anything new that's coming out of FEMA or the public health world. And then we go around the virtual table, and each department gets to report what's going on in the department. If they had people that are out being quarantined, they give us a report on their status. A lot of times, so-and-so's coming off quarantine, they'll be back to work next Monday. We also ask about if there's any needs in the department. Do they need PPE? Are there any other issues that we need to work with them on? Do they need the assistance of personnel, Colin, Sam Vasquez, we kind of roundtable that kind of aspect. Is there any needs in your department that aren't being met? And we check that off the list. That's really the purpose of those meetings. Today we met at 9:30, and we led off with a lot of what we already talked about tonight. And actually the same thing I talked to them on Friday about the, people who are symptomatic, non-symptomatic, close contact, non-close contact. We've reminded everyone what that all means and everything, and to share it with their employees and reinforce it, and also, all the other things that we can be called upon to help with if there is a problem. So, by and large, I can tell you, I think Lori's on the call. Since we've done it, I've gotten a lot of feedback, positive about it. Most people appreciate that level of interaction. It may not be 100%, but I think it's pretty darn close to 100%. People that I've talked to like the idea that we get together and share that level of information. But it really isn't for the first time hearing it. It's more like touching base. So anyway, I probably spoke more than I needed to on that.
So we chop this thing. I think that's separate from what I'm asking. And again, we can end this real quick. If there's, I guess for starters, I think I tried to articulate the cycle. I would suggest highly that if there's no merit in what I'm suggesting, that you make that recommendation to these guys, and then we can end this, and I won't take offense to it. So do you?
That was my point.
No, I didn't mean that offensively. Go ahead.
No, I think it is a good thing to fold in public health if we can. I just thought I heard that meeting 2 times a week isn't sufficient enough time to share information for the first time. That's really not what that's about. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Perfect. And what I was clarifying by informing them is, and this could be, I think the purpose of informing them and getting them involved in the individual case is let's just face it, there's a reason why the building principal and assistant principals at Polytech don't make the decisions. They're the people folks. They're involved with us. You need a different level that's separate from the connectivity that can make that scientific decision, right? Because if it's my staff, I'm going to fall over myself to do what I feel, not what I think, right? So 2 things we can discuss. Do we want to involve DPH? It sounds like we do. Do we want to clarify specifically, because I didn't have that feeling coming in here after several conversations, that an employee shall follow this protocol. They inform the director. The director informs you guys. However you want to make contact with DPH, do it. But then your decision goes to the director, who then implements your decision. It shouldn't, I don't think, be individual directors making decisions. because then you get inconsistency. And I wouldn't blame the directors. Again, they feel for these folks, and so do I. So I think that needs to be clarified, that is not the decision-making process that goes on. And rightfully so. It doesn't happen in my school. So we're close to being done, I think, if we get clear on that. Mr. Hall?
Well, just to follow up, because if I understood it right, there's a lot of individual personal judgment. If you walk in the building and you don't feel well, then you send yourself home. And I know from somebody working with vulnerable communities that right now the testing sites are overwhelmed. So I come in the morning, I feel, turns out I'm 99.5. I send myself home. I call my boss and say I'm home. It takes me 3 days to get a test because the testing sites are overwhelmed. So what are those people doing when they're home? Are they working from home? Are they on leave? Are they in limbo? Does the director send that up the line, or do they sit on it? Do they say, okay, stay home till you get a test? So I guess I'm just reinforcing Commissioner Buxton's point that we should have a rigorous protocol. The person that I know, they get up in the morning, they go on a website, they check boxes. Do you have a cough? Do you have a chills? Do you have a sore throat? And then any of those get yes, and this is all third-party outsourced, but they have a protocol. Then somebody calls them and says, this, that, and that. You need to go get a test before you report to work. And then you have to have a negative test before you come in. So it's all standardized. It's just as simple as can be. So all that to just support what you said.
Well, and I would say we're doing exactly that. We're just not paying for technology to do it. And the expectation is the employee has to contact the department head and the personnel director at 2311. Can't be more clear than that. It's at every entrance. It's been on the blog site probably 24 times. And so, yeah, it is. We're a small organization when that goes. I mean, technology-wise and everything. If we haven't explored any kind of third-party vendor to do it, we're doing it ourselves. But I think it's been effective. Can there be a possibility of an employee saying, I'm sick, but I'm going to continue? Yeah, probably. It's the honor system. I mean, but when someone is sick and they go home and they are sick, the expectation is they're on sick leave and they're actually using the COVID leave that's available that Alan can explain. And, that's kind of the situation. If they're leaving and they're not sick and they're able to work from home while they're waiting, yeah, we want them to do that.
So Commissioner Hall, you asked about what the limbo status. So under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, they do have the emergency paid sick leave provision, and every employee is entitled to up to 80 hours of paid time, paid by the employer, does not deduct from their accrual. That's if they've worked at least 30 days. And unfortunately, is not reimbursed by the government. So essentially the county is paying for up to 80 hours per employee for this very specific purpose. If they're sick, they go home, they get paid. They have to go get a test. They have to fill out the form saying why they missed the time, and then when they get their negative test, they submit it. That's the process we followed. We've had probably, about 60 to 70 employees take advantage of that act since it went into effect on, I think, April the 1st. And it's worked fairly well. We do have a couple now who burn the entire 80 hours, and they now have to use their sick leave. Downside, who knows what Congress will do, that law expires at the end of the year, and that will not be available after the first of the year unless Congress extends it, adds more time. If they do that, hopefully they'll put a provision in there which would reimburse local governments and for that expense. Businesses get reimbursed, governments do not. To answer your question, Commissioner Hall?
It does, thanks.
Yeah.
The last thing, in respect to that, so maybe we can get to it, is we're not going in the wrong direction. We're on the same page. That is not what we're here for. That is, in fact, why we're here. Maybe it's not clear enough. When the employee informs the director and the personnel director, I just want to change the way it works a little bit. Because I want, once that occurs, a strict procedure to occur that's driven by, if it's one or three, now the employee's interacting with me and working, not me, the three will deem directors of this. They determine, this is what you're doing, this is how you're doing, this is what the investigation shows us. And I think DPH has shown us that not everything requires a hardened approach. That some of them are low-risk contacts where you're able to come back. So for me, and I know Alan wants to speak, but for me, what I'd like to see us vote on is just that, a clarification on when an employee introduces to the county that he's or she has been in some way exposed. What is the strict standard that goes to the top and then back to the employee, and that maintains control of when that employee comes? Because I can tell you that it's not certain. There's a lot of vagueness on some guys that are staying home, what the expectation is, what the outcome is when they come back. And I don't think it's your fault. I think there's not enough clarification or expectation. Anyway, I appreciate you guys, man. I'm sorry I've been long at this. Go ahead. This isn't even my committee, so let me get out of the way.
Mr. Angel.
Thank you. And that brings up another interesting question. Mr. Quayla, right now when an employee goes out and they have to come back, how many days does it usually take for somebody to come back?
Typically, if they're positive, I know in health services, it's a little different. They are out for the 2 weeks, and so they do get a letter from Department of Public Health or Division of Public Health that says the employee may return to work on this day when they're positive. If they believe they may have come in contact with somebody, they go get a test, and if they're negative, they can come back to work.
The reason I'm asking that, in yesterday's paper, they said they were CDC was reducing it to 7 to 10 days. So should we still keep 7 to 14 then based on the doctor and a negative result?
If you get a negative test, you're permitted to come back to work. And there is an interview with what was the extent of the exposure, was it marked casual, low risk, and all of that is done. Some of that 69, of course, people who have utilized the emergency paid sick leave have done it for child care. Also covered under the Act, if your child care provider is closed, you're able to get 2/3 of your salary paid by your employer. And we've had a number of employees use that as well. So I did want to clarify that. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments? So, Mr. Pedamage, are we clear as to what is being expected, or do we need to make further?
I think we got good direction on the remote work. And I think the latter part of the discussion, all I'm really getting out of that is we need to fold in Department of Public Health into the process, because I think we do have a process of what people do, and it's been communicated over and over again what the steps are. Alan, say something. I mean, are we not doing what I'm saying we're doing?
Yes, we have shared with employees over and over what the process is. And like I said, we're certainly welcome to see if DPH can contribute to the process that we're doing right now. And I will contact them tomorrow. And if they can play a larger role, we'll certainly encourage them to do that. If they are overwhelmed, I think that the process so far has worked. It's worked astonishingly well. I hope that it continues to work this well.
You're comfortable, and it appears you are, with the line of communication between when an employee comes into the county and introduces himself as COVID impacted, to where it gets to you and where it goes back to him and how that's all worked out, then I'm getting out of the way. But I'm going to tell you that going here today, based on the conversations that I've had with all of you and others, I find that not accurate. And I don't think that's fair to you guys. But if you're okay with it, then I got to be okay with it. So there you go. Let's get on out of here.
So Commissioner, I know where you're going with this because we've had the conversation, but I think some of the things that you said today, you've reinforced the process that has been followed, and you reinforced that directors, and county administrator has emphasized this a lot recently in our conversations, that directors and the managers have to be responsible, not only for making sure folks wear masks, but responsible for making sure sick employees go home, that sick employees get tested, that we're notified. So that is something he's been doing. It sounds to me like you guys have reinforced that and made it certainly clear that that's what you expect as well.
Don't sit down, Alan.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, President Banner. So I just want to be clear, we've given you guys some direction. Give us some direction. I have employee A calls me or texts me and says, yeah, somebody, so-and-so got sick and they've been sent home by the director. I'm not hearing anything. What do I tell them to do?
Contact the Director of Personnel.
Thank you.
We are not micromanaging. And once you go down that road, then you're down that road. So everything gets referred back to Al.
Okay, gentlemen, are we clear? Mr. Petamaz, you straight?
Yes, sir.
And I think before we move into informational items, I think we should have the Vice President read this executive session motion into the record, because I'm not too sure, because last week was a committee meeting, I'm not too sure we voted to do that. So, Mr. Vice President, it would be for December the 15th?
That's correct, and we'll do it just because, if it's just because, or if we need to, we do. All right. I move to go into executive session immediately following the business meeting on December 15, 2020, for the preliminary discussion on site acquisition for a publicly funded capital improvement, legal strategy session regarding collective bargaining or pending or potential litigation, and personnel matters pursuant to 29 Delaware Code 10,004 B2, 4, and 9.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Pepper, second Mr. Sweeney, to go into executive session on December 15, 2020. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none. Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you, Lori. 7 affirmative votes moves us to executive session following the business meeting on December 15th. Informational item. Any public comments?
If there are any public on the call-in line that wishes to speak, press star 1 and we recognize you. Last call for public comments, star 1 on your mobile device.
I see no hands.
Back to you, Mr. President.
No one on the line. Commissioner comments. Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. President. This past Saturday, I was honored to participate with the Brandywine Valley SPCA in handing out pet food to King County residents. When I got here at 10 o'clock, they were backed up around the building, out the front entrance, down the tree line, all the way to the end of the road on Blue Hen Boulevard, around the corner, and before we started, they had gone down South Little Creek Road toward Dover and turned back into Levy Court Lane. That's how many people went through. and everybody got something in that entire line. I only had a few people who were irate, and I talked them off the ledge. The end result was 8 tons of pet food was handed out to people. And that just tells you how bad things are out there right now.
Any other commissioner comments? Mr. Angel, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week, I did my first NACO virtual board meeting. And it was a very good meeting because we also had a discussion about the Lake Hall meeting coming up February, March area. And it was decided that we were going to do virtual also for that one. The discussion was, of course, the COVID and what's been taking place, and there's a lot of discussion about it. And it got to the point where there was no discussion, and I felt that I needed to at least voice my opinion, which I did, and that was, you can't fix dead if you go in public, because the hotels aren't opening up. They've been closed, so there's no place to really go. And if you try to open them up, it's because of the laws. I think Washington, D.C. there's no more than 50 people allowed in a room right now. So I did just state that as my opinion, and it passed. We are doing virtual, not because of that, but I mean, I did make my peace with it. And then on top of that, we had a very good presentation from President-elect Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And they were joined on, and it has really excited NACO because they're both former commissioners, county, and they've never seen that kind of excitement on both sides of the fence to have that type of individuals in leadership at the president, vice president level for NACO. So it was very, very positive, and I will hope to be part of that next year too. It's just to fill you all in. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Angel. Any other commissioner comments? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Regularly moved and seconded. Mr. Howell, Mr. Sweeney. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
No, I'm having too much fun tonight. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Bantha?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you, Lori. 7 affirmative votes. We are adjourned.